But that also is inherently contradictory. Like, the government is both so powerful that they can set up a fucking patsy that is virtually impossible to contradict. Okay? But they're not powerful enough to also engage in mass surveillance and find the actual shooter.
I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
High-level character in the company was bragging about, regardless of whether America stays a democracy or not, the insurance companies, specifically theirs, had a plan to continue to extract money from people. They're like a parasite that spreads, a zombie that can't quit
They could
eating.
have found an Arabic dude, you know what I mean?
The top brass was
Tied it
making
back to
absolute
Hamas,
moolah.
too,
They
somehow.
would want for nothing. Their
Like, the
great-grandchildren
opportunities
would
are
want for
endless.
nothing, even if
Also,
they quit tomorrow.
Creating a fucking
And
patsy.
the eye was
and
on
finding a
always
fall guy, creating a
expanding
fucking patsy
the
is
company.
like also
There's no
in
such
and of
thing
itself a
as
difficult endeavor.
having enough.
Uh-oh.
Even
Someone's
in a
getting up.
drastic scenario
Like, there
where
are
for
so
some
many
reason our
moving
country
parts.
just completely
Why didn't he turn himself
Just
in? Why
curious,
isn't he
what's your
pleading
stance
guilty?
on
Why does
universal
no say
healthcare,
I
like,
love the
unrelated
feds,
to
I
the
did it
situation?
alone?
My stance
Why
on
did
universal
Luigi say
healthcare
stuff was planted?
before the
Wait.
situation and after the
So
situation
on the one
remains
hand,
the
you're
same.
talking about Luigi saying that
Is it
money
moral
might have been
imperative?
planted
So
in
this
his
brings to
backpack or
jury
something.
nullification.
Immoral and unjust
Okay.
that we do not
Which is
have
true. He did
universal
say
healthcare
that
in this country.
in Pennsylvania.
It's also not
But
unrelated
on the
to
other
this
hand, you're like,
situation
why
at
didn't he
all.
turn himself in, and why isn't
This
he?
is,
Why isn't he pleading guilty? Why the
a
fuck?
Vice piece on
And why isn't he? Why isn't he pleading guilty?
a person that
Why
works
the
for a U.S. healthcare insurance
But on the other
company.
hand, you're like, why didn't he turn
crumples in on
himself in, and
itself.
why isn't he?
They're still
Why isn't
going
he
to
pleading
be
guilty?
going after you.
Why the fuck would anybody plead guilty? You fucking idiot! The whole point of it is to not plead guilty.
I worked for one
So you can
of
probably-
America's
you can try and get
largest
off. Like, what are you talking
subrogation
about?
law firms. When your insurance covers a cost for you, they can make somebody else responsible for repaying that amount. This is where insurance subrogation comes in.
That's not even my take. A healthcare CEO getting popped and people celebrating is an indication of class resentment that's been earned by the predatory capitalist society. Healthcare is just the easiest topic to get people to agree with you on because everyone has a negative experience with it. Okay, but your fucking skepticism isn't hallucinating. I don't know for a fact how he was caught. I'm simply saying I'm more inclined to believe in conspiracy than the current narrative. I know. Because you're perma-stuck in believing in grand narratives and conspiracies. Squash that part of your fucking brain. This is a very important aspect of what I try to instill upon my audience. Contrary to what my naysayers and my haters might say, it is concerning how ready you are to believe in grand narratives. Okay? Sometimes things do make sense. Okay? In this circumstance, it does make sense.
To extract from not seeing them as other humans, I saw a lot of abuse, verbal abuse, of course, not having any kind of empathy for anybody's lifestyles or situations. We had a system of notes that would show what was discussed with the claimant previously. So there was this lady that had a lot of notes in it, like, she's lying, she keeps giving a sob story. I spoke with this lady and was giving her the general spiel. And she cut me off and she said, I don't know why you guys keep calling me. I'm telling you, I'm on hospice. I'm dying. Like, I am in my sister's living room, in a medical bed. I am dying. Her sister got on and just, screaming, like, just please leave her alone. I didn't know what to do with myself because what do you say to somebody like that?
A decades-old study found conspiracy-minded people will rate directly conflicting conspiracies as more likely than the traditional narrative. E.g., they will rate it more likely for Elvis to have been assassinated and even more likely for him still to be alive in Barbados than the mainstream OD cause of death.
It was probably one of the lowest points of my life. I would see frequently people were bringing in like $30,000 a week. There's hundreds of people working for this company. There was a lady that worked there for 16 years. She was one of those top 5, and just...
What is this? Humans inherently seek out a narrative to make the chaos of the natural world make sense to them. This is the source of religion even. Stop looking for a grand narrative. Assume the simplest explanation is the correct one before entertaining further ideas. People, I think, cling to this mindset that the government is so diabolical in those conspiratorial ideas because it gives them comfort to think it's so grand scale and beyond what they can change or influence themselves. Is often a simple explanation is something they do have the ability to influence or change. The former gives too much power and solidifies a narrative fools can digest. Yeah. I think people also personally assume that, like, because there are so many fucking harms that you're experiencing on a regular basis, that that the government must be all powerful. But that also is inherently contradictory. Like, the government is both so powerful that they can set up a fucking patsy that is virtually impossible to contradict. Okay? But they're not powerful enough to also engage in mass surveillance and find the actual shooter. Like, the State Department, do they actually have patsies, or do they actually activate like random fucking lone wolf attackers? Do they urge them on? Certainly. They do that with regular frequency. They do that usually to pat themselves in the back and celebrate their W's, that the FBI is actually out there working at the behest of the public. You know, they'll find like a random autistic teenager of Muslim background online, and they'll radicalize them and then goad them into doing an act of terror only to stop them right before it happens. That kind of stuff is covered extensively by even mainstream media. Okay? The problem is, on the one hand, they do that, okay, and that happens. On the other hand, those things usually happen in the margins. Those things usually don't happen in broad daylight in front of millions of fucking eyes. Okay? And the profile of a person like that is very different than HasanAbi FBI handler. Thank you for the 5 get the subs. The profile of a person like that is very different than the profile of a guy like Luigi Mangione, who has like extensive social media footprint. You know? Who had friends, who comes from a fucking wealthier background.
Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars were being brought in just by this one woman. We are incentivized to take the most amount of money from these people as
Free use Femboy, thank you for the 5 get the subs.
possible, without letting them know. We had full reign on adjusting what they would actually have to pay if they settled. We're paid on commission through a fee structure. So if they are making good faith payments, say $250 every 2 weeks or $250 a month, we would get 15 to 20% of that as a fee. If we were to settle a lower amount for them, we would get less in fees, and fees are what our commission is based on. The system was set up that if we showed any kind of humanity to these people, we were screwing ourselves over, and I can't tell you how many times I got in trouble for just trying to be a decent person. We are supposed to be doing this by the book. A lot of these cases,
I think all matter of conspiratorial thinking is inherently is against anti-capitalist or against materialist ways of thinking about things. You slam a conspiratorial puzzle piece into every equation you possibly can, because the simple truth, a materialist analysis of the world, is too simple, where you're like, oh no, it's too boring, it's too simple. there has to be some larger there has to be some larger power players at play here. No, but literally, I just had double jaw surgery a week ago, and my insurance company literally called the goddamn hospital room in the middle of the night while I was in so much goddamn pain, just hours after the surgery, to ask if I needed anything. Clearly, just a way to get me to ask for more drugs. Like, it's so fucking scummy and devious. Your Alex Jones is a Fed theory. Yeah, I think Alex Jones could potentially be a federal agent, or I used to think that. A psyop in general, because every now and again he lands at a real conspiracy and he hammers that on over and over again. Mass surveillance by the federal government was one of them in the 90s. People laughed at him, but ultimately he was right about that. Meanwhile, he was also incredibly wrong about a ton of other conspiracies. So when the guy you're listening to has one correct conspiracy and then 98 very obviously silly, idiotic conspiracies like interdimensional vampires and the like, yeah, people are going to not believe any of the things that he's saying. That's why I used to say that Alex Jones is most likely a fucking psyop. But I don't think that he was like a federal project concocted specifically to make people not believe in any of the very obvious, very overt ways in which the government does harm to people, like mass surveillance. If the guy who's constantly chirping about mass surveillance also believes that there are lizard people around, most individuals capable of critical thinking are going to go, well, that's probably not the most truthful agent of criticism here. I think for me to believe a conspiracy theory, there has to be a shit ton of evidence. That's precisely the reason why I guess have a different attitude on Jeffrey Epstein killing himself, where I do not believe the mainstream media narrative on that. The whole of the parapolitical sphere is about how you can mask anti-communism is crazy talk.
Is when people don't exchange their insurances at the time of the wreck because they're like, oh, it's fine. There's like barely a dent. My insurance will cover it. Later, when the insurance company hunts them down because they don't know that that person has insurance. That's why we're supposed to be getting their insurance. Like, that's the first thing we're supposed to check for with each call, because they might have insurance and not be on the hook for any of this. So a colleague saw me in the middle of a call, told me to pause the call, asked me what I was doing there, said I was not there for customer service. He pointed out the fact that I am poor. And he said, if I were you, I would focus on winning and not on making sure that these people have insurance or not. You need to get money. You don't need to get their insurance. That was a part of the job description, things we were trained on. If they had insurance, we were supposed to collect the data on that. And when the people that have that responsibility to do their work correctly are in it just for the greed and are completely skipping out on certain steps, lives are needlessly ruined. We would call you sometimes multiple times a week until we got the money. Just completely would not stop. I experienced one with a lady. It was a flood damage in the apartment downstairs. And the lady actually did have proof that it wasn't even her fault, but we were still pursuing her. And I tried to send it back to where we double check things. And they're like, no, she's guilty. And I'm like, no, look at the paperwork. She has clear proof that it was actually the apartment above her. And we were still calling that lady. You really can't hide. We used a program to pull up dossiers on people. So if you had the lack of luck for having the same phone number as a claimant used to have, if you worked with them, ex-spouses, we might call you. Basically keep chipping away until we find the claimant. One of my coworkers called up a wife of a man that was a truck driver. He owed roughly $55,000. And this lady was completely blindsided about this. She didn't even know he had been in Iraq. As she is becoming more and more panicked, the reality of the situation settling in, he's becoming more and more chipper, and he actually turned around and high-fived me once, like, she started to cry. Some of the techniques I witnessed people using to harass the claimants, one person was very misogynistic towards women, would talk down to them, call them baby girl. Another person would spend his mornings conversing about different ways to lie. They would find loopholes in, say, this person might live in a state that they can't have their driver's license taken from them, but we could still threaten that maybe because maybe the state might change their mind one day and make it legal. It was quite blatantly a lie, and we were encouraged to tell that lie. One of the tactics we were supposed to use on people that said, I don't have any money, tell them, hey, do you smoke? Quit smoking. Different things that we're supposed to use as examples of things that they should quit in their own life so they can pay us money. We were told to tell them, take out some credit cards, high interest loans. You know, that's a cycle. Once you start borrowing from one high interest thing to pay another thing like that, like you're in a bad way. It's an endless loop of misery. This experience was harrowing, just a cold splash of water in regards to what I thought our society was capable of. You would hear people screaming at people on the phone and then go to lunch and have a coffee and just happily talk about something they did on the weekend. We were completely incentivized.
This, by the way, is yet another way in which the distribution of different hands that engage in this kind of like violent and cruel behavior creates not only plausible deniability, but also creates a structure where the people don't feel as though they are engaging in an act of cruelty towards those who stand towards those who have the exact same class interests as them, right? It's something that I talk about quite a bit when talking about companies like, you know, Bain and McKinsey, like consulting agencies that are tasked with mass layoffs at the behest of company profit margins. There are a bunch of different teams at these companies, and it's no different than the ways in which, back in the day, a firing line would be given weapons where some people would have duds, like blanks, and other people would have real bullets. And the real reason why they did this, is so that people could, you know, sleep at night, not knowing if it was their bullet that actually killed the person, or if it's actually not the bullet, or if they just shot a blank. There is a compartmentalization and a normal process here that takes the blame, the individual blame, out of your hands. Yeah. Or the lethal injection with 2 buttons, one just for being for show. Yeah. A diffusion of responsibility. Exactly. When you're working in a much larger structure, when you're simply a cog in this machine, a machine that is churning out so much death and destruction, it feels as though you're just playing your part. It makes it much easier for you to just sit there and say, well, this is just my job. I'm simply just doing my job. I'm not the one who ultimately is responsible for this death and destruction. And that's how you arrive at this, and also the perverse incentive structure that they have, right? Even in a company like this, where you know, when you're engaging in like insurance claims, where you get more money for fucking people over further, even if the person you're fucking over is identical to you in their financial circumstances, it causes you to overlook that reality so that you can focus exclusively on your immediate financial gain. Okay? Conspiracy. Oh my God, big dogs. Man, you are so fucking annoying, dude. Holy shit. Conspiracies are real, and correctly identifying them doesn't make you crazy. Historical forces determine history, but individual agency exists and can matter. Understanding this isn't reactionary. Yeah, except you just said that individual agency exists and can matter. And in order for any number of different conspiracies to actually be correct and actually be real, you need not just individual agency, you need to apply tens of thousands of people working in the most competent manner possible to engage in this kind of conspiracy. That's why I always go back to COVID narratives, right? Like, there are a shit ton of people who just genuinely were so brain broken by for-profit healthcare that they thought that the numbers of people who were dying of COVID were just false. That would need, you would need millions, not just tens of thousands, millions of healthcare professionals all across the globe working with their own individual federal health agencies all across the globe, working alongside epidemiologists all across the globe to create this grand narrative that COVID was actually killing people when it wasn't. Okay? No, you need to find a guy and pin him on a cork board. Also, medicine is good and RFK is a charlatan. Okay, you don't believe in that conspiracy, but you're believing in a fucking little, relatively harmless conspiracy on this one. My point is that the fundamentals are still the same. That's it. Also, Lolo literally expressed skepticism of the Luigi story. Sure, I'll ask him further when I see him. I don't really care, though. Like, so what? Okay, I have disagreements with Lol Overruled. I don't have to agree with 100% of the things that he says. Every conspiracy theory is impossible until it's published by a journalist. Do you think that your haphazardly put together assessment of a situation is the same as like a journalist who actually did investigative reporting? Like, you're looking at fucking Twitter threads and TikTok videos and then rehashing them in this chat. Journalists, on the other hand, oftentimes if they're not working for the State Department, are literally actually doing investigative reporting. What the fuck are we doing, man? All right, we're going to get into the Matt Gaetz conversation in a second.
Things like this are one of the big reasons why people hate insurance companies. This company has absolutely ruined people's lives. 100% completely undeniable. And
Lolo didn't express skepticism. He said people should stop talking like this guy admitted shit, and if you care at all, stop assuming shit for the state. Yeah.
When I think back to that lady who was dying, she didn't deserve this. Nobody deserves.
The House. All right, let's get to another conspiracy. Matt Gaetz, except it's not a conspiracy theory at all. Matt Gaetz's House Ethics Report has come out. The report finds evidence that Gaetz paid thousands for sex and drugs, and it also includes that there is enough information to conclude that Matt Gaetz had sex with a minor, a 17-year-old. Let's take a look at what Matt Pizzagate Gaetz had to say.
The Ethics Committee has released its final report into Matt Gaetz, the former Florida congressman and President-elect Trump's first pick for Attorney General. The committee says it found evidence that Gaetz paid a 17-year-old girl for sex and violated multiple Florida state laws. The panel also found evidence he used cocaine and ecstasy on multiple occasions while serving as a member of Congress. CNN's Caitlin Polantz has been digging through this report now that it's public. Caitlin, what are you finding?
Phil, that section about Matt Gaetz and sex with the underage girl, that captures a lot of what the committee was looking into here. Just some of the facts that they were able to find, not only through documented evidence, but also interviews with more than half a dozen witnesses, incling the victim, the girl or the woman
rape, by the
who was
way.
17 years old, heading into her senior year of high school at the time. She told the committee, with testimony, that she had sex with Matt Gaetz, then a sitting member of Congress, twice during a party in July of 2017, including at least once in the presence of other party attendees. She recalled receiving $400 in cash from Matt Gaetz, which she understood to be payment for sex, and she had just completed her junior year of high school. The committee also looked at several other relationships that Gaetz had with women, not underage women, women who were adults at the time, but many of them told the committee that they did have an understanding that Gaetz was reimbursing them in some way for sex. So that led the committee to find that the congressman, while he was in Congress, was engaged in commercial sex, that would be prostitution, giving money to women, also statutory rape, that is the allegations related to the underage girl, and then also illicit drug use. The way the committee phrases it at the top of this report is that they determined there is substantial evidence that Representative Gaetz violated House rules and other standards of conduct prohibiting prostitution, statutory rape, illicit drug use, impermissible gifts, special favors or privileges, and obstruction of Congress. This report is now out publicly. Matt Gaetz had run to the court system this morning to try and block the release of the report, but the House has posted it online, as well as some of the evidence that they've gathered. And he, both in court and then also on X, has been saying repeatedly that these allegations are false and reminding people he has not been charged with any crime.
That's Caitlin Polans for us. And to Caitlin's final point there, Gaetz has vehemently denied the allegations. He's called his behavior, quote, embarrassing, but not criminal. This morning, he reacted on X saying, quote, giving funds to someone you are dating that they didn't ask for and that isn't charged for sex is now prostitution. Question.
Okay. It absolutely is criminal, man. What the fuck are we doing? Like, you can say 17-year-old woman all day, every day till the cows come home, but a 17-year-old is not a woman. A 17-year-old is a fucking minor, dude. Like, what is happening right now? I'm not even kidding. I'm not. I feel like whenever there's another person who is like outed as a pedophile, I feel like we are moving in this like very weird direction. Whenever like a Dr. Disrespect style situation happens, like people become more and more comfortable just saying shit that I think normally most people would be embarrassed to admit outright. It also blows my mind that regardless of this House Ethics Committee report, or not regardless, but despite the fact that there is this House Ethics Committee report out there and people knew what was going on in it, there were still Republicans who were willing to fucking vote to appoint this guy because Donald Trump wanted him in that position. Which I think to me shows that these guys are all fucking not only just assholes, but like they're doing a whole bunch of fucked up shit that they are so comfortable with a guy like Matt Gaetz knowing full well what he has done. And yet they were just like, yeah, I don't give a fuck. Donald Trump wants him in. We're going to vote for him in. We're going to vote for him anyway. So at the very least, they seem comfortable with a sex pest. We need to know about the UAPs. Let's get a statutory rapist up there, huh? What?
Question mark, exclamation point, question mark. There is a reason they did this to me in a Christmas Eve report and not in a courtroom of any kind where I could present evidence and challenge witnesses. Joining me now, my excellent panel of reporters, Jasmine Wright of Notice, Semaphor's Dave Weigel, Hans Nichols of Axios, and Politico's Olivia Beavers. And Olivia, I want to start with you. You have live in this world, and not necessarily the world described in the report, I don't think, but on Capitol Hill with Matt Gaetz over the course of the last several years. This is now public. Yes. What does this mean going forward, I guess?
Well, I think, one, we're all wondering what this means for his career moving forward. A lot of Republicans believe he was eyeing a gubernatorial run when Ron DeSantis' term limited out. He floated himself for Marco Rubio's Senate seat that he's expected to vacate if he's confirmed into the incoming Trump administration. A lot of the contours of this report we had heard rumors and allegations of, but to see them in print, they're pretty damning. They say they found substantial evidence of him sleeping with a 17-year-old, of him, going to these parties where women had been sort of recruited by one of his